Hello, my name's Luke Angstead. I'm the author of the book, The Musings of De La Pew. It's a 20-year investigation into the nature of reality, the nature of God, existence, human beings, and the relationship between all of them. I'm here today with Bob Kraft. He's a constitutional law expert. I'm also here with Rick Weber, who I've known Rick for several months, and recently we got back in touch, and about last week he shared with me his extraordinary life story over the course of 3 hours and how 36 years ago, he became embroiled with the American legal system, and it has been an ongoing nightmare for him ever since. So I was just blown away by Rick's story, to say the very least. And without any further preamble, I want Rick to pick up the story in 1986 and bring us up to date to where he is today. But Rick, please.
Well, thank you, Luke. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Thank you.
Robert, thank you for being here as well.
My pleasure.
The first thing I want to start with is what I'm going to share with you all today is a case that's 36 years old, and I have a case number, so if any of you want to reference it, it is case number S as in Sam, 86-03521-C as in cat, F as in Frank, A as in Allen, CFA. It's in the 18th Judicial Court, Brevard County. So I have it here on transcript, but we're going to fly by the seat of our pants here. So back in 1986, I was engaged to be married, and there was an incident that took place at a gym that I was working out in. I was into bodybuilding. I played semi-pro football, so I was an athlete. I was a jock, so to speak. And there was a family that lived in the apartment complex where my fiance and I lived. We were both in separate apartments at the time, but we were in the process of moving in together because we were going to get married. And one afternoon at the gym that we worked out at, this lady who came into the gym, it was pretty obvious that she had some kind of a fixation on me.
Mm-hmm.
And she walked up behind me in the gym. I mean, we lived first of all, we lived in an apartment complex, but we kept our doors open. That's how it was back then. You didn't have the crime issues we have today. So there were always get-togethers at the apartment complex down by the pool. So we got to know a lot of people there. And this particular person one day just walked into the gym, and she walked up behind me and she just grabbed me inappropriately. And of course, not expecting it, I lashed out and I cursed her, and I cursed her in front of her friends, and I cursed her in front of people at the gym.
But she grabbed your rear end, just so we're clear,
Yeah.
so people's imaginations don't run away with them. She
Right,
she grabbed you on the rear end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My fiance is standing right next to me, so I was like, "What do you do?" You know. So I immediately just launched a verbal attack on her, and that was the end of it. Well, I was in school at the time to I was going to school to become a stockbroker, and I was working for my father's company. He was a builder, and I had just finished a class and went out and bought myself a new car, just because. And during this process, I'm moving out of my apartment into my girlfriend's apartment, and one afternoon, my brother and I had gone to the beach. This was right after I got the car as a celebratory. He was actually going to the police academy at the time. And so we went to the beach and hung out for the day. And when I got back from the beach, I went to my apartment. We had to park our cars in a separate parking area because our parking lot was being repaved. And it just so happens that the parking lot we had to park in was right outside of this woman who had grabbed my tail end earlier. It was outside of their apartment. So I get back to my apartment. My brother drops me off. I go into my apartment, and that's when my girlfriend come up and she says, "Hey, you need to come out and take a look at your car. Somebody threw an egg on the hood of the car." So I went out and observed what was going on. I immediately we didn't have cell phones back then, so I waited for my brother to get home to his residence, and I called him up and I asked him. I said, "So, how do I proceed here? What are the steps I need to do?" He says, "File a police report. Eventually, somebody's going to say something." So I did. We filed a police report, and it wasn't maybe. It was a couple of weeks, maybe a little longer than a couple of weeks later. Somebody in the apartment complex had witnessed somebody around the time that the car was egged, had witnessed somebody at the car. And so they brought it to our attention that they thought it was this young lady's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as Felicia was her name, and I probably shouldn't use her real name.
That's fine.
It's
I
okay.
know the last name.
Yeah.
Okay. So as soon as we found out that, we waited in the parking lot knowing that the mother was coming in from work, and when her mother came home, we politely just went up and we said, someone has made it clear to us that they think your daughter may have been the one who had egged the hood of the car. And I was looking at a $700 expense to repair the hood. So the mother kind of said, yeah, she's been having troubles with this child, so this wasn't something that she thought was unusual.
Yeah.
So we let it go. We let her know, that we were upset and that there was going to be, a debt to pay to repair the hood. So apparently, then the mother went into the apartment. We went back to our we went back to our apartment. I went and got some towels and apparently a plastic spatula to try to scrape the paint off the hood, or to get the egg off the hood, but it had taken the paint off. And then at that point, the mom summoned me to come over to the apartment, and that's when they hit me with, the daughter said that I had molested her or had raped her previous to this, and this is why she did that. So immediately, I walked away from. I denied the situation, and I went back and I told Felicia what was going on. And so Felicia went to the apartment and actually went into the apartment and had conversation with the mom and the daughter. And you'll see in the transcripts later on where, and I've got some notes here, that during the conversation that Felicia had with the mother, and then the mom kind of stepped away, and it was just Felicia and this young girl. And apparently this young girl had a diary, and she had written in the diary that she had met a nice boy. Okay, then that's pretty much verbatim what was written. And so Felicia was upset, but then Felicia started asking her questions because there were things that were kind of unique about me. I was a bodybuilder. I shaved my body for competitions, and so there were some verbal exchanges about where I shaved to, what, that kind of thing. And as it turns out, Felicia had actually, and this came out later on in one of her depositions to the police department, that she had actually asked the young girl if she knew anything, if she recognized anything about my body that was different, which it was obvious. I mean, you could point me out, and bodybuilders, you can pretty much point them out from a mile away. They, because of the fact that we pretty much don't have much hair on our bodies. So anyway,
and just for the arts, I mean, you were in exceptional shape. You were a college athlete, a running back, and you also tried out for an NFL team. So I mean, when Rick Weber walked by, I mean, people noticed. I mean, you stood out from a crowd. Is what we're saying, to say the very least.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, where was I?
You were talking about certain parts of certain shape that could identify you as opposed to someone else.
So, when Felicia had asked these particular questions, she wasn't getting any answers. So then Felicia voluntarily pointed to areas and says, "Does he shave to here? Does he shave to here?" And basically gave the answers to this person. And so the conversation ended. Felicia and I left, and Felicia came out. And of course, she was upset. And then I went knocking on the door because I was at that point upset about what was going on, and was told that if I didn't leave the premises, they were going to call the police. So we left, and I called my brother up and told him what was going on, and he just kind of said, just lay low, wait to see what happens. Well, I went ahead and called the police department anyway, and I reported that we had a person that had not admitted that the car was egged, that they had done it. So then when the police department came out to investigate, that's when they told the police department about this charge. So, and you'll read in the transcripts, the mom had already sent the daughter out to be with a friend for the night, and when the police knocked on the door to talk to the young lady, the mom was like, "Can we do this another time?"
Mm-hmm.
So there was no sense of urgency. Now I'm sorry
Yeah.
if it was my daughter and it was any member of my family. First of all, my daughter wouldn't have been anywhere but there, and I would have been calling the police. But
It shows you how seriously she takes the accusations, that she didn't take them at all, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a telltale sign right there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, long story short, later on that evening, I was, my brother had called me and said that there
I have
were,
a question.
I'm
How
sure
long
about-
after the supposed event transpired, did the police get involved? What was the time frame?
I'm gonna say probably it was longer than 2 weeks.
So it was a couple weeks later.
Yeah, it was longer than 2
So,
weeks.
so the process was this event supposedly took place.
Exactly.
She egged your car,
Yes.
and then after it was brought to your attention that there was going to be that the car was egged by the daughter. Now there's this charge
Yeah.
of okay.
Well, the car had actually been egged. If I recall this. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, exactly what you just said.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
the alleged incident was 2 or 3 weeks prior to this. So
Okay. All right.
Okay,
So we
yeah,
had
yeah.
a couple weeks go by.
Exactly.
It's only when
Yeah.
the police become involved that now there's this charge.
But now there's this charge. Yeah.
Okay.
So so I'm interrogated. Felicia's interrogated, and when we left the police department, well, first of all, my first question to the police, but this is in Palm Bay, Florida. So my first question to the police officer that was making doing the interrogation, first question I asked him is, how do I show that I didn't do this? And he said, DNA test. I said, okay. What do I need to do? He says, you need to agree to a DNA, which I did. So the interrogation went on. It was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning by the time it was all completed.
I have a question.
Sure.
They told you to do a DNA test 3 weeks later.
Yes.
That's intelligent. Okay. Thank you.
So we left for the evening, and
What you're implying is that she could have had innumerable sexual partners from now to then.
I'm
It's yeah.
That's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I hear you. I hear you.
oh, it gets even stupider.
Yes.
It gets even worse. It gets even worse. But anyway, so we're assured we were assured because Felicia had been actually, she had actually been taken down to the police department 3 hours before I got there, and they had already interrogated her, and so we had no time to come up with a story to tell the police. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's clear. So she went in and she was interrogated. I'm in another room 3 hours later, and they're still interrogating her. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning when we left. So I'm there from midnight to 5. She was there at like 11 or 10:30 till 5 in the morning being interrogated. So when we left the police department, they assured us, and it's in the transcripts, that the arresting officer, or the officer that did the interrogation, his name was Jeff Kranick. I want to make sure I throw his name in there because. So he assured both of us. He says, "You know what? I don't see this going anywhere." And he says, "You guys are free to go." So we left and we went on with our life. Of course, things were a little rocky between Felicia and I, but eventually we moved out of the apartment complex and we moved in together in another apartment complex in another part of town. So then time goes by, and the next thing I know, I'm being arrested and charged with a rape charge. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And of course, I'm 26 years old. I come from a very, my family was very, my parents were very, they sheltered their children very much so. I had no idea how the system worked. I had no idea, up from down, what the heck is going on here. So I was arrested, and the charges were filed against me, and then I was bonded out, and then we went with a public defender, and that was by the advice of my youngest brother, who was going through the police academy, who assured me that, and assured my parents that public defenders are trying to make a name for themselves so they can get into a private firm. So, okay, that seemed logical to me, right? So that's what we did. We went with the public defender. Well, never really spoke to the public defender until we had our first court date. Now, during the deposition portion of the trial of when Felicia was giving her depositions to the police department, there were some changes that had to be made, and Felicia recalled a time that when she was in the room talking to the young girl pulled her diary out and gave Felicia a date, and the date was May 2nd of 1986 that this alleged incident took place. So,
And this is going to become crucial for our audience too. This specific date and also the time window too, from which it happened too. So as we progress through this, this is going to become very important.
Exactly.
This detail.
So once a date was established, I had no idea about discovery, all the other things that go on in a court proceeding. I had a public defender, and he wasn't talking to me. So once that date was established, then I did the only thing I knew to do, and that was to try to find where I was at on May 2nd, 1986.
Makes all the sense in the world.
I think she said the incident took place between 6 and 7 o'clock in the evening. So I had to find.
So a very specific time window, May 2nd between 6 and 7 p.m.
Exactly.
Again, this is going to become very important for our audience as this unfolds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've realized that during that time frame that the city of Palm Bay on an annual basis did a charity, and it was I don't remember quite sure what the charity was, but they did a super teams competition. And if anybody's familiar with Wide World of Sports, I know you young millennials have no idea what we're talking about, but the Wide World of Sports, every year after the NFL and the Major League Baseball teams, whoever won the World Series and whoever won the Super Bowl were put together to compete against each other on an equal levels, track and field, weightlifting, those kind of events. And that's what Palm Bay did every year for a charity. So when I realized where I was at, I went to the city of Palm Bay and was able to get a copy of my signature when I had signed in, and it was on Friday night. It was May 2nd, which was the first Friday in May of '86, and I had signed in at 5 o'clock. And so I had my signature along with everybody else that was at that particular competition, which on that Friday night was the weightlifting competition. And
they knew you. The rest of the names, the people on that list, they knew who you were, right? And again, this is going to be very important as the story unfolds. This is going to be very important.
This is small town America.
Yeah, so they know.
So everybody knows each other, and our teams were from that small town, just people that we associated with. So I signed in, and then the competition never ended until after 11 o'clock. And then, of course, everybody got together and went to a place to go and eat and have dinner and just hang out, laugh, carry on like we normally do. And it was back to business as usual the next day. So we get closer to the trial.
So from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. on May 2nd, you have an ironclad alibi. You have 10, 12, however many people are with you, over 100 people. But I mean, but when we come to the moment in court when you have these people, when the people that were at this event with you, this becomes very important. So your alimony is unimpeachable from 5 to 11. Alibi. What did I say? Alimony. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. So your alibi is but your alibi is unimpeachable. Yeah. So this becomes very important as we go along.
Definitely.
Yes.
So I gather all the information, and again, discovery I was never told I had to go and give any information to anybody, so I'm just assuming when I walk into the courtroom on the first day of the hearing, or the first day of the trial, I'm just going to hand this to them and say, okay, this is over with, right?
Yeah.
That's what I assumed.
You're like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's easy for me to disprove what she's saying. Hey,
that's what I assumed.
Move on with my life,
That's what I assumed. So, there's a trial that's set, and in the meantime, we did a jury selection, and apparently, I had made eye contact with certain members of the jury, and the people that I had chosen to be on the jury were disqualified because apparently during the questioning and answering phase of it, I smiled at somebody, or they smiled at me, and it just so happens it happened to be there were two young. Well, I'm not gonna say young. They're about my age.
Yeah.
But nobody that I knew.
Yeah.
And there was just a courtesy smile,
It's
so
quite.
to
It's a
speak.
yeah. It's a human. Yes.
Nothing flirtatious.
Yeah.
But
Perfectly
that's not how
natural.
the state attorney saw
Yeah.
it, I guess. So they were
Well,
just
that's not how the state attorney wanted to see it.
exactly.
It's all about desire. So what you're progressing through is the state's attorney's desire to win versus doing the right thing and your rights.
Exactly. And there were two other individuals that were not on the jury that I had chosen, and instead what happened was there were two divorced women, which, regarding the type of charge I was facing, are you kidding me? I mean, that right there, in my opinion, was a bias.
Yeah, they're going to be highly prejudiced against you.
Oh,
Yeah.
highly. And then the one other member of the jury was a
Wait,
former.
wait till we get into the middle of how it's supposed to work, and
Mm-hmm.
I dropped the bombshell on jury.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Another member of the jury was a former prison guard. So again, stacking. But again, I didn't know at that time. I'm like, oh, apparently, this is how it works.
Yeah.
Okay. So our first trial comes up. I don't remember the day, but I know it was either October or November of 1986. Was the first trial. So I show up at the courthouse with a couple handfuls of friends. This document with my signature on it. We go into the courtroom, and we're laughing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're laughing about this because I mean, at this point, I've been in jail, and I have this to prove that this is nonsense.
Yeah.
So we come in, and I guess we made a ruckus, and so the state attorney turns around and looks at us, and the next thing I know, my public defender is coming back, and he's asking who all these people are. And so I politely handed him the sheet of paper with my signature on it. May 2nd was when it was dated, and I proceeded to explain to him that these were witnesses that saw me at the event, and actually there were people there that today are still working for the city of Palm Bay. So he immediately took it to the state attorney's office, to the state attorney that was sitting there, and the next thing I know, the judge is granting a continuance. So the state attorney asked for a continuance, which means that the trial was postponed. And it was rescheduled later on. It was rescheduled May of 1987. I believe it was May 12th was when it was rescheduled.
Now, Rick, in this interim, does the woman who accused you and her daughter, do they drop the charges and the state picks them up? Because I want to, before we get ahead, I want to make sure I'm clear on this because
Exactly,
it's been like a week and a half since you.
Yeah.
But this seems significant to me to bring this up because at what point does the state pick up the charges after?
Well, apparently, going back to when the police department showed up to try to get the girl, and they actually had to go and pick her up themselves because the mom was adamant she just wanted to be left alone for the weekend. I don't know exactly when the mother and the daughter had dropped the charges, but I do have a recording from 2014 when I did hire a private investigator, which we'll get into that later, where the girl on recording stated that they had dropped the charges and that the state picked it up because she was a minor and they made them testify against me.
Okay.
So I don't know what the legality part of that is, but so they had dropped the charges.
Okay.
So now we're going to we'll go back to we'll continue where we're at here. So
Sure.
So May of '87, I go to court. Now we get into the courtroom. My parents are sequestered from the trial. Okay, and my mom had a lot of information. My mom had already questioned the state attorney's office on situations that had transpired, and when we get into court, from the continuance. So the continuance was because I had information that basically exonerated me.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
get into the trial in May of '87, and all of a sudden, now for the first time I hear the date's been changed to sometime between May 1st and May 31st of 1986.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's pause here a second. I mean, Bob, but isn't this is a great time? I mean, we go from knowing it was the specific day, May 2nd, a window between 6 and 7 p.m. to it could have been any day during the month of May. I mean, you talk about
Yeah.
shocking lies. I mean, right on their face. I mean, it's
Well,
patently
there's-
false in someone's.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
listen,
that right then and there. You're like, oh my God, what is going on here? I mean, when
Well-
Rick told me it's the first, I was like, I mean, my jaw just hit the ground. I'm like, wait a second.
Right.
Yeah.
And really, here's the problem. The problem is this is happening all over the place. So
Yeah.
this behavior, what we're finding right now, and what's being revealed is that because this system is so broken, it's causing what's happening in our country. It's literally the problem, one of the major problems. Okay, and we have a system that's broken. We have right now. There's a law in the books in the state of Florida that state's attorneys makes 10% of all the bonds that are issued out of bond hearings. We were supposed to get bailed out. We're now getting bonded out because they're using it for money. So they are generating their own money through this system. Okay, and the higher the bond, the more money they make.
Sure.
Okay, I mean a lot of people don't know this. I'm gonna take a little squirrel trail, but Kyle Rittenhouse. You want to know what Kyle Rittenhouse is really about? Kyle Rittenhouse had a $2 million bond that was paid by a foundation. They knew they were going to lose the case. Right now, there is litigation going back and forth between attorneys because they don't want to return the $2 million bond. And the last offer I heard is that it's $1 million. They prosecuted Kyle Rittenhouse to get $1 million in bond so they could put money in their pockets. That's what Kyle Rittenhouse was about. There is no Second Amendment. That's what the clowns in the news are telling you. Go look at what happened after, and you'll find out what really happened. And that's what they're doing. They're putting bonds on people so that they can write those bonds and they can actually generate money. And this is what's going on. So these wordsmiths, state's attorneys, and public defenders. Really, the public defender system isn't what you think it is. Believe it or not, most of the public defenders are actually private attorneys, and it's basically AAA. They sign themselves on a list, and then when their number pops up, this is the case, and they take it. And that's who I have a friend who left practicing law as a public defender, and he explained to me that you're on a list. It's AAA. They just punch the numbers. So as many cases as they can get is how many. So we're like, oh, the public defender's office. The public defender's office is overwhelmed. There is no public defender's office. It's AAA. Okay, how many tow trucks do you have? Okay, so that's the game that's being played. So we've manifested a reality that doesn't exist. We think that we're going to walk into the public defender's office, and that public defender's office is going to have cases up to here, and it's going to be some dude who got a stapler stolen, who's buried in paperwork, and he's looking for a stapler, right? That's not what it is. They're private. They're literally private law firms that are signed on a list. They punch a number, okay? So that's an illusion in itself.
So maybe we should get back there, Rick.
Yeah,
before we get too far down on this tangent, I want to tell.
I want to show you
Sure.
intent.
Sure.
This is about intent, and I'm using these points to say this is a desirous intent to manipulate the construct of facts to get a win. This is war, and it's being conducted against people who are vulnerable and they don't understand, and the system is literally operating at war with the people. And that's the point I'm trying to make with this little squirrel trail.
Yeah.
Okay?
So we went from May 2nd
And
to it could have been anywhere from May 1st to 31st, and that was So please, Rick,
yeah.
pick up the story from
And
there.
believe me, I was very naive.
We all are.
Who couldn't be? I mean, unless you have specific training, unless it's either formal or you independent training where you studied it. I mean, everyone's going to go in there oblivious and naive to how the legal system works. I mean, how could you be expected to be well versed in it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why
That's their advantage.
It
which
is.
is why they have their
Yeah.
own language.
Yeah.
You know?
You're absolutely right.
So, and I'm finding out a lot more about that too. So back to what
So we were in May 1987. They said anywhere from May 1st to May 31st.
Exactly. So then the questioning phase starts up, and the attorneys, of course, the accuser had her day in court first. So, and you could tell all through her testimonies and all through her mom's testimony, she was all over the board. They were asking her questions, and it's in the transcripts. Anybody who wants to read it, she was all over the boards, and she was making statements, and then she was going back on her statements, and then she was changing the whole program was just being changed, one question after the other, and there were a couple of times during the trial that I was looking at the jury, and they were like shaking their head, like they couldn't believe that this was even happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she gave her testimony, and of course, yes, the state attorney had a forensic person there from CASA, and their job was to basically discredit doing any kind of medical exam on this person. That was their job, was basically try to discredit. Whether it was too long, it could have been a tampon, it could have been a bicycle, it could have been horse riding, that her hymen was broken, but yet she claimed that on the date that this took place, that she bled after the incident. So that kind of evaporated their story. Then the state used a lot of different angles to try to coerce her to say different things. And the way they dressed her in ponytails, both sides, like a little yellow.
I mean, it looks like she's 8-10 years old. Yeah,
exactly. So
disgusting.
So that's what the jury saw. They saw the visual. And so she finishes her testimonies, and then they call in the landlord of the apartment complex, and the landlord had made some statement about that I was in their office at some point. I'd been there for 2 years now, and the landlord made some comment about the fact, oh yeah, Rick and her were in the office, and it came across as if it was just general conversation, okay? But that's not how the state attorney turned it on to the jury, that that I had asked how old she was and all this other crap, and I'm like, really? But again, I'm sitting there minding, just listening to what's going on and paying attention to what's going on. And I believe when the public defender cross-examined the manager's, it was the manager's wife, I believe, because apparently it happened 2 years earlier. I believe he asked her what she had for breakfast that morning. She couldn't recall. So again, it kind of put a question mark on it. Really, you can remember something 2 years ago, but you couldn't remember something you had this morning for breakfast. So that was a good play on him. But as it all turned out, I'm accused of this. She could describe my room, and during the time, there was a moment. There was a time when she was in my apartment. First of all, she had a key. She worked for the apartment complex. She was a minor, but yet her mother couldn't afford to live there. That was my understanding. Her mother couldn't afford to live there, so to help offset some of the expense, the young girl, the 13-year-old, was given chores to basically sweep the corridors, and this was an apartment complex. Now, mind you, it's an apartment complex where everybody's apartment is the same. You walk into an apartment, they may be reversed, but there are apartment buildings that are all the same. So that was one of the taxes that the state attorney drilled on, was the fact that, okay, you've been in, you know what this apartment looked like? Yeah. Well, yeah, because she had a key. She was given a key to deliver UPS mail or any packages that were delivered to anybody at the apartment complex. They would drop them off at the manager's office, and then the manager would give her a key, and she could go to any apartment in the whole complex and drop off the information. Well, there was a day when I was moving furniture out of my house, and I believe it was this particular day, May 2nd, and it was early in the afternoon, and I was waiting for one of my neighbors to come over and give me a hand, and she had come up the stairs, and it wasn't that she was crying, but you could tell she was upset about something, and she wanted to talk to me, and I'm like, okay, I'm moving furniture. If you want to hang out here, you're welcome to. I don't know how long I'm gonna be gone, but then after I get back from here, I've got this competition to go to. So my neighbor, his name was Mike. We went and we delivered the furniture that I'd sold to somebody, because I was moving in with Felicia at that time. So I moved the furniture out, and this girl was at my apartment when I got back. Now, mind you, like I said, we didn't lock our doors, and when I left, my door was open because my neighbors were all home, and we just watched out for each other's stuff. That's all there was to it. So, so when I get back to the apartment, Mike was my neighbor, so we walk up the stairs, and here she is in my apartment, and I'm like, okay, I never gave her permission to go into my apartment, so if I was gone for over an hour, so which gave her more than enough time to go into my apartment, see the furniture that I had, see what was going on in my bedroom, my bathrooms, and everything else, which is what they used in the courtroom to make it look like that this is how she was.
So there was someone with you when you came back.
Oh,
There
yeah.
was a guy named Mike with you,
Next door neighbor.
who saw her in the apartment.
Exactly.
And you hadn't been there.
Exactly.
Did this person testify?
No.
Why?
He did not. The state never.
They never
called.
The public defender never called him
Never
as a
called
witness.
never called any. I never had any witnesses. None of my witnesses were ever called. So
No witnesses.
even the ones from they
postponed,
they eliminated May 2nd. At this hearing, at the second trial, it was nothing but sometime between May 1st and May 31st. There was never a mention of May 2nd until our side got up to, and that was the next day. So again, I could tell by the way the jury was reacting that they weren't believing what she was saying. So then day 2 of the trial, we get our chance to talk. And they call Felicia in, and of course Felicia's explained to the jury what was what took place in the apartment complex, and the state attorney was back and forth with her. Well, you said this on this date when you were under oath, and she says yes, but there's also a what do you call it when you add something to it?
An amendment.
An amendment. There's an amendment. So going to the amendment, Felicia had changed some of the things that she had originally said because after recollection, let's call it that. So Felicia managed to get in May 2nd, so the jury heard that when the state attorney, or maybe it was my public defender that asked, so when you were in her home on the day of the accusation, did she show you anything to confirm a date? And Felicia, I believe it's on page 18 of the transcripts under the deposition portion, where Felicia told the arresting the officers that she had a calendar, and she had said that in her diary it was May 2nd, and she gave a time. So Felicia was able to get that. That's the only time May 2nd was ever mentioned at my trial. Everything else was between May 1st and May 31st.
We're talking about the second trial in May of 1987, not the first one.
No, the first one never took place.
Yeah, the first one never took place. Okay.
Yeah, the first one never took place.
Okay.
So that was the only time during the whole trial that May 2nd was ever mentioned. And of course, the judge intervenes and says, answer the question in a yes or no form. So I don't know if he struck that, if he struck the May 2nd date. I'm not sure if that was stricken or not, but at least it was out there. So the jury heard May 2nd, but then through the rest of the trial, it was maybe sometime between May 1st and May 31st. And when they questioned me on things, again, listening and paying attention to what you're asked, I was scared, first of all. And so whenever I was asked a question, I immediately tried to answer to the best of my ability, not paying attention to the dates that they were asking, which came up later on at the end of the trial when my lawyer, or my public defender, asked me if I was making these statements based on between May 1st and May 31st, and that's when I was able to say no, it was not based on those dates. So back to the hearing, or back to the trial. There was, first of all, my parents were sequestered, so they weren't allowed to hear anything that was going on in the trial. And then
did they give you any reason for that? Why they?
No, apparently the state attorney said that he was going to use them as
Witnesses?
witnesses against me. but they were never called. They were never, and
No, they exploited it to get them out of the room.
yeah, exactly.
That's a lot. Yeah, they do
Yeah.
that a lot. They
Yeah.
do stuff like that a lot.
Yeah. So, you have any?
Oh no!
Okay,
I'm clear now. Yeah.
Going
Okay,
back,
going forward. Yeah.
Going back to our discussion.
Sure.
I'm kind of at a loss here. Do you have any questions regarding things that we talked about?
Oh no! I just wanted. My question was, did the court give you any reason why your parents were not allowed into the courtroom? That was my question at that point. I thought.
There was never any.
Just because
So
it seems, on the face of it, it seems strange. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a law expert. It just seems strange to me why, if a man is on trial, his parents would not be allowed to be witnesses in the trial. That's
Exactly.
strikes my mind as being very strange. So I'd ask
Well,
that
it's
question, right?
strategic. It's not
is.
strange.
Yeah. Well, it is.
It's
But I mean,
strategic.
yeah,
It's game theory.
yeah,
Get them out of the room.
yeah.
Let's
But
exploit
that
it
was just
for
my
game
question,
theory.
Rick. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to pick up from there.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I'm kind of at a.
Oh, so you were talking about the trial in May of 1987, and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
parents
Yeah.
weren't allowed in the courtroom,
Yeah.
and from
So
there,
then
that's
what,
where the
what
what
happened
happened
after
next?
that?
What
So
happened
you
after
got,
that?
You got the date out, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah, we got the date out, and then the trial proceeded. I was asked questions regarding my physical being, my physical.
so you testified.
I testified. Yes,
Okay.
I did testify. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came time for the deliberation, and during the trial, the state attorney had mentioned that this young girl had tried to commit suicide,
Mm-hmm.
and portrayed it to the jury that it was because of this alleged incident.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when it came time, and of course they had all these CASA members there that were basically giving confirmation that yes, this seems logical, this seems accurate as far as her trying to commit suicide because of the psychological damage that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that never resonated with me then, and I don't understand why my public defender had never subpoenaed the psychiatrist. The psychiatrists were never called into the trial to confirm what the state attorney's accusations were. I guess it would have been the state attorney's obligation then to subpoena the psychiatrist, right?
Not for defense.
Not
Would
for
have been
defense?
public defense.
Well, he was using them. He was using the psychological evaluations as his reasoning for the girl having to try to commit suicide.
Well, yes, but it would have been up to the defense attorney
Okay.
to discredit them.
Okay.
Um,
Well, that didn't happen.
no,
That
no.
didn't happen. There were no psychiatrists
Mhm.
at the court at the hearing at all. So what the jury was presented, they were presented a case that was all hearsay. There was no evidence. I had evidence to prove that it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
During the police interrogations and in the trial, a questioning came up about a birthmark on my right thigh and whether or not I was circumcised, and I don't have a birthmark on my entire body, and for the record, I was circumcised, but that was not the description that this person gave to the judge and to the jury. So the jury's hearing all these birthmarks. That I got all these markings. That there you go.
Simply not true.
That
Yeah, it's a
confirms
lie.
that,
Yeah.
that this took place.
Yeah.
And I remember this, but I also remember, not following through. But there was a point where I almost stood up and dropped my pants just to show them that I had no birthmarks. But
You probably should have.
You probably should have. Yeah.
You
Well,
should have.
yeah, but
You literally should have.
yeah,
Because that, and I hate to say this, and I had my hearing yesterday, and when you saw me in my hearing yesterday, I was leaving it all on the table,
yeah,
firing away, and unfortunately in this duel, right? Because it's a duel. Yeah, whatever's said is what happened.
exactly.
You should have dropped your pants, stood up, and said, "Show me the birthmark."
Exactly.
Because that is indisputable fact. If it doesn't make it into the courtroom, it doesn't exist. And we don't understand that And attorneys, well, we'll get into that another time.
Yeah.
So
So the jury's heard nothing but allegations against me, with no medical exams, and I don't even think this was even brought into the trial, that I had actually agreed and signed a waiver of my rights to have a DNA test done to prove my innocence. I don't even think that was ever mentioned in the trial. And yet they refused. They flat refused, and they gave the excuse that she didn't want to be seen. She didn't want anybody to touch her down there. Really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're putting a man's life in. You're convicting a man, or you're trying to convict a man of a rape charge, and you refuse to give them medical. I mean, yeah. I mean, again, I didn't understand then what was going on, but as I've gotten older and gone through the nonsense I've gone through for the last 36 years, which we'll get into that, I'm blown away to this day still how some things went down. So, no evidence, and in the final arguments is when the state attorney made it perfectly clear to the jury, without there being any psychiatrist there to rebut his statements, that this young girl had tried to commit suicide, and it was because of my actions, and that she has to live with this for the rest of her life, and I need to be punished. And I was found guilty. I was found guilty by a jury.
how long did it take for the jury to deliberate?
Not long. I'm trying to think if it went to the third day. I don't even think it went to the third day. So the first day, the alleged victim testified. The second day, I testified. So it was only just a matter of maybe a couple hours that the jury came back.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So then,
Jury deliberation is very interesting because it's actually not being conducted in the United States the way the Constitution and the Bill of Rights says it's supposed to be conducted. See, they use a term called hung jury, and they've convinced us that there's a hung jury. And then they convinced us that you had to have a unanimous decision of guilty or not guilty. Well, that's a lie. It's a complete lie. This is an all or nothing game. It is, you have to have a unanimous decision of guilt, or you are free.
it's funny you bring that up, because
That's a fact.
there was an alternate juror, and she was an older, more mature person than anybody else in the jury.
Right.
She was the alternate, and she was the one during my testimonies. I just felt I needed to make eye contact with her, and that's who I made eye contact with throughout most of the trial, was that person, and she found me innocent. She was the one. She was the alternate, and she's the one that came back and said that she didn't find me guilty. So going to the sentencing phase. Now we're at the sentencing phase. I'm arrested. I'm put in jail.
I want to say something before you
please
get
do.
any further.
Please do.
Okay, before you get into this. I have his documents. He gave them to me. And I've reviewed some of this case, including some of the testimony. And I shredded it in about 30 minutes. There is actually testimony, or there's actually affidavits from police officers that contradict each other and then turn around and say that they totally believe what this girl was saying, and what they actually wrote was completely different. I'm telling you that.
Yeah.
I looked at it because I'm not going to lie to you. I believe everyone's lying until they prove it. It took me about 30 minutes to shred this case. All right? And I didn't go through the whole thing. I went through enough. I'm like, this is all crap. Everything in this case is crap. So I believe them because I saw the documents and I saw what the police wrote and the affidavits that they swore to. There's no value in their words. Even to the point of contradiction of how it went down, what went down, where it went down, and what actually happened. It was all over the place. So that's a fact. I looked at it.
Are you able to easily reference that on your laptop, Rick? I mean, we don't have to do it right now, but
Okay.
maybe
Yeah, oh, yeah.
perhaps later
Oh, yeah.
in
yeah.
this
Yeah.
conversation
I've got
we
the
can. If you want to like read it verbatim, hold it up so people can see that we aren't just
Okay.
you're not just speaking from your memory. Yeah.
This is a sentencing
Sure.
paperwork
Yeah,
here.
because I know you mentioned that to me before we
Yeah.
started that
Yeah.
So
it
it's
might be a good
crap.
idea to hold it up
It's
for the
built on
camera.
crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we're at the
So now
sentencing.
you're the sentence. Okay.
Now we're at the sentencing phase. I go into court. The judge is there, and the courtroom. There's I don't even remember. There were maybe 35, 40 people there at my sentencing, and it just so happens that my parents had hired a lawyer to represent me at my sentencing, and he did the right thing, and he subpoenaed the two psychiatrists
Mm-hmm.
that the state used in his closing arguments to just basically flambe me
Mm-hmm.
and set it in their minds that this girl tried to commit suicide because of this incident. So now we've got the two psychiatrists who I had never talked with
Mm-hmm.
up until I had no idea who they even were.
Mm-hmm. So
So the psychiatrists come in, and my attorney goes through my family. My family gives their statements about me, and then my attorney that's representing me at that point calls the psychiatrist to come and give their statements. Now this is what the jury never heard. The psychiatrists were the people that this young girl went to with all of her problems.
Mm-hmm.
And both psychiatrists gave the same statements, that they were in court on that particular day, not knowing why they were there, had no idea, were never told that this situation ever took place. But yes, the young girl did try to commit suicide, and it's in the paperwork here. She did take a bottle of pills, but this was long before this allegation was made, and it was because of family issues
Mm-hmm.
that she was going through between her and her mother.
You say her mother had like a stripper's pole in the house, something similar to that, or her mother made her dance in lascivious
Well,
ways. I mean, I
that's-
remember that. I mean, but I mean,
yeah,
this is
that's paperwork
yeah.
that's here in the
Yeah.
sentencing portion. So the attorney is asking.
And I just say that, I just say that to the letter audience know that this girl, this 13-year-old girl, has been traumatized by her
Exactly.
mother, by her family. I mean, there was a history
Boyfriends.
long before she cooked up this story about you.
Yeah. She was 26 years old, and
Yeah.
she was my age, and she'd already been divorced 5 times.
Yeah.
So
So,
that should tell you
It
a
does,
little
yeah.
bit about mom. But
Mhm.
anyway, so the psychiatrists now are they've been subpoenaed. So
Mhm.
they were under the understanding, because they're subpoenaed, that all of a sudden now doctor-patient-client confidentiality is out the window if you're subpoenaed. So the state
You're there to give testimony specifically for your client,
exactly.
and you're ordered by a judge to do it.
Well,
You're in contempt if you don't submit.
Well, both psychiatrists made it clear to the judge that they were unaware, that never once did the girl or the mother ever mention this incident, and they've been going to her for over a year now. Okay, so we're in court. The jury never hears this.
mhm.
Okay. And it just so happens there was a female psychiatrist and a male psychiatrist. Not that that's important, but the male psychiatrist actually was my high school social studies teacher. So he knew my credibility. He knew me. He knew my integrity. He knew my family. We went to the same church.
Mhm.
So he'd known me for 14 years.
Mhm.
He knew my family. He knew the kind of person that I was. And he made it clear to the judge that he knew who I was. And he knew my family. And when they gave their statements that this is the first time that we've ever heard of this incident, the state attorney stands up and says, "Oh, by the way, you guys are infringing on your doctor-client confidentiality," and the judge called them out. And I don't know if it put the fear of God in them, but the female psychiatrist kind of backed down. But Mr. Graziano, God rest his soul, because I know he was in his 70s at that point, so I don't know if he's alive or not yet today, but he stood his ground with the judge and said that we were subpoenaed. So my understanding is if we're subpoenaed, we're supposed to testify.
That's true.
And so he did. So the judge had an obligation right then and there. Here's evidence, again, more evidence that this didn't take place, but instead he refused to override the jury's decision and proceeded to sentence me to the guidelines, which at that time, I got 3 years in prison, and I did 10 years on paper. So this was 87. I go to prison. We appealed. My parents automatically appealed. My parents put out $25,000 for an attorney to appeal the case. So I'm in prison. I'm in jail. I'm in county jail, getting ready to be transferred to state. Well, the day that I got transferred to state was the day that the judge granted the appeal. So my parents were forced, instead of driving 20 minutes to the county jail, they shipped me out that night before. So my parents had to drive all the way to North Florida to the welcoming center up in Butler to come and pick me up. So they bonded me out, and I was pardon?
Bond.
Yeah, they bonded me
Another
out.
bond.
Yeah, they bonded me out, and
And when did this judge come and visit you? Because he said something. He said something when you were. Tell me about this.
After the original case, after the original trial, when I'm taken down to the holding cell, the judge came down and he looked me right in the eye and says, "Mr. Walker, I didn't find you guilty." And I turned to him and said, "Well, can't you overturn this?" And he says, "No, a jury found you guilty." His words. Thomas Waddell Jr. was his name. And ironically, after the sentencing phase, he retired. He walked away from it. So he washed his hands of, I'm assuming he washed his hands of the guilt that he may have been harboring. I don't know. But again.
Okay, Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Here we are. I have done nothing of the sort of what I'm being charged with. I have evidence that proves, based on her initial police investigation, her initial statements, that I was somewhere else. The dates get changed, and then I have psychiatrists that come in that the jury never heard, that hears exactly the same scenario, that this never took place, and the judge still goes through with the conviction. There were also 40 letters. My parents were diligent about making sure that we had information from her classmates. My parents walked into the courtroom with 40 letters, which we can't find anymore, which I'll get into that. There were 40 letters written by her classmates. And these letters were very explicit about the daughter had been going to school, bragging about doing table dances on her mom's table during parties at the house. So this
It's sick. Yeah.
This shows that there was definitely things not
Child abuse.
There was child abuse going on here,
Yeah.
but it wasn't me who did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and then there were we had those letters, and so anyway, I went through the courts. I went did my time. I did 3.5 years in prison, and then when I got out, I did 10 years on paper. And during that time, I got married. I met a young lady, and we got married, and we moved over to Sarasota.
But back to this judge. I want to get Bob's expert opinion on this. Does the judge have a duty, if there has not been sufficient evidence put forth during the trial, to dismiss this case, for it not to go to the jury to make a decision? Because I just wanted to get this clear for myself and for Rick and for our audience.
Well, it's an interesting question,
Yeah.
and I know that this has happened.
Because he's the referee, so right? I mean, yeah.
Well, technically he's a referee,
Yeah.
yes. But again, we'll get into this problem on two sides. So we'll talk about it on the equity side, which is the bond side, which is the system that's running right now. Okay, in this side, there's no rights. Okay, you have no rights. So when you're approaching it, the judges have free reign. They're pretty much gods that sit on their throne. Okay, and the real problem is if it was a jury trial, and this is a play on words that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a jury trial, it's not doesn't carry the same force
Mm-hmm.
as a trial by jury
Mhm.
under the 7th Amendment of the Constitution. Trial by jury determines a fact. A jury trial is a jury opinion that is liquid, that
Mhm.
can be overruled or moved or changed however they want it.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a jury trial at equity, which is why
Mhm.
there are bonds being issued.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, he really didn't have any rights. So the judge could have done or could have bucked the system, but he would have been bucking the system because for whatever powers that be, he was worth quite a bit of money,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted that money from him.
Mm-hmm.
So if the judge, and it was possible that the judge would have done it,
Mm-hmm.
there could have been a right argument
Mm-hmm.
of double jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have changed your system. Remember, they've been leading this system this way for a long time, probably up to 150 years, to get it to where they have it now,
Mm-hmm.
where everything's about the bonds. So that's my opinion.
It just felt like there was some gross negligence on this judge, that he was derelict in his duty,
Well, there's
and
gross negligence,
yeah.
and this is something important. And this
and
came
it felt
up
that's
yesterday.
why I wanted to.
This
flesh
this
this out
came
a
up
bit.
yesterday in the
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
Every single attorney, every single judge, bailiffs, sheriffs, they are sworn public officers and agents, which means there's an affidavit of oath
Mm-hmm.
that they took, and they swore to uphold the Constitution of their state,
Mm-hmm.
the Constitution of the United States, which means they also swore to uphold the Bill of Rights,
Mm-hmm.
which means they are committing, for lack of a better term, treason.
Yeah. Yeah.
With subjugating people and their rights, or reclassifying them, or making them legal people, or the little wordsmithing that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we, the people, have failed,
Mm-hmm.
because our system is not running right now
Mm-hmm.
to push back.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Rick, do you want to pick up the story after you?
Sure.
So you got
So-
married. You say you got married, and yeah.
So I got married and we moved over here to Sarasota,
Mhm.
and tried getting a job, and already the stigma of being a sex offender, because I was on probation when I moved.
what
over.
year was this?
This was in I got out of prison in 1990,
Okay.
and then was on probation to 2000.
Okay. So this is 2000.
So no, this is 94.
94. Okay.
1994, I moved over here from Sarasota, from Melbourne, Palm Bay area, and my wife and I came over, and then it was trying to find work over here, and I could already see, because I was on probation, so I had to report, and I had to let my employer know what was going on, and as soon as the word sex offender was put out there, right away, whether you wanted to believe it or not, there's a stigma that goes with it.
Mhm.
And finding a job and keeping a job, even though I was setting records in sales with the organization that I was involved in, done. So I realized in '94 that I had to do my own thing. I
want to go ahead. I hate to interrupt. There is some argument that probation is actually a bill of attainder,
Mhm.
according to the Constitution. And that's something hopefully soon we're going to explore. I think when they say no bills of attainder, probation is indentured servitude, which is a bill of attainder.
Mhm.
So go ahead.
So I realized that in order for me to come to a new area, I have to start my own business. There's no way I'm not going to be able to work for anybody else, because as soon as this gets thrown out there, I'm done.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I started a painting company and was very successful. Was able to build a beautiful home in a country area called Mayaca City,
Mhm.
and everything was going great. And but there was still some things that were lacking, and unfortunately, my marriage ended in 2010, and 2012, I moved back into Sarasota. I lost the house in a foreclosure. Now I come back into
Remember 08 was the
Mhm.
downturn. So
Exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was during that time. I was
Mhm.
so I moved back into Bradenton, and going on with my life, just doing what I normally do. In 2000, and so I'd finished my probation in 2000. So from 1990 to 2000, I'd done my probation. Was
Mhm.
done. You know, you take that that freedom breath. You know, it's like
Mhm.
finally it's all over with. Now I can just live my life out.
Mhm.
2006 rolls around, and they introduced the Sex Offender Registry, and I'm informed after 6 years that I have to register as a sex offender. And right away, the first thing that came to my mind was, this is ex post facto.
Mhm.
You can't. Oh no, this is legal. This is and so I went back in to find out a date, because there was a cutoff date,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, the cutoff date was October 1st, 1997. If you had finished your sentencing phases of your convictions, anybody that was that finished their penalty phase by September 31st of 1997 didn't have to register. But anybody who finished on October 1st forward had to register. I'm like, okay, well, who drew that? Who came up with that boundary where you don't go? You know, if you want to put sex offenders on the sex offender registry, doesn't that include everybody, or do you have a family member that is being, that's kind of where I went with
that's
it.
the end of a fiscal year.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It's the end of a government's fiscal year.
Okay.
October 1st starts the next paying money cycle for fiscal years.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So now I'm on the registry, and I've got a business going. Okay. I mean, I've got 18 employees, so I've got to. I'm doing everything I can to just stay in line and not step out of bounds in any way, shape, or form.
What did the transition? What did the transition? So here you are, you're done, you're free, right? You've served your time. This is years later. What did it feel like to go from that to here are your servitude rules?
And yeah, here are your rules, and if you step outside of the boundaries, you are again
What did it feel like?
looking at. It was like it all starting all over again.
Yeah.
All the penalty phases, all the nonsense. I mean, anger, frustration.
Yeah.
The fact that here I am now. I'm at this point. I'm 46 years old.
Mhm.
Okay.
And your original charge was when you were how old?
26.
So this is 20 years
Yeah,
later.
20 years.
26,
20
yeah.
years later.
20 years later.
After service and everything.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're
Back,
bound and shackled.
Yep. Back in the
Back in
system.
the system.
Back in the
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
I think it's important.
It is. It's
Important
very
question.
important to make. Yeah. Yeah.
So when this took place, it was it was, and my wife and I, my ex-wife, my wife at the time, we vacationed a lot because we now had that freedom.
Mhm.
We didn't have to report anything. I could go anywhere I wanted to go, and all of a
So
sudden,
you were married.
yes, I was married.
You were married when this flipped over.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I was married at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we would go on vacations every year and never had to, never had any worries. Here we are now. Now I'm back in prison, and that's what it was like. It was now, if you go somewhere, you have to tell them where you're going. If you're staying at a certain hotel or if you're staying at a certain resort, you have to tell them where you're at. You have to let them know when you leave. You have to let them know. I mean, again, you're on the radar.
Yeah.
You're basically a slave.
You are.
You are a slave.
You
yeah.
are a slave.
Yeah, they're monitoring every
It's-
move you make. You're a slave.
yeah,
You-
you're a
absolutely.
slave.
You have to
You
get
have-
permission and
yeah.
report everything you do.
You
Absolutely.
have to report everything.
Yeah.
So 2010 rolls around, I go through divorce. So now I'm losing my house, and I come back into Sarasota. But before I moved out of the house, I had gotten involved with another person who had 2 children, and everything was great. the husband knew about the situation. Everything was going great between her and I. And actually, we had actually talked about, well, we had more than talked about getting married. We actually were 3 days away from getting married. And we're having issues with her daughter playing the game between the parents. And then then this sex charge was played, and so that ended the discussion, and that ended the relationship. But in the meantime,
No, wait, not by the daughter, by the ex-spouse or who?
no, by the daughter.
What did the daughter do?
The daughter was playing mom and dad against each other.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, which is the game.
Which is the game. Yeah, and I ended up not wanting to play along with the dad, and I made it clear to the mom that she was being played, and so there was a lot of friction between us, so it just ended. So then, fast forward to 2016. Okay, I'm on the Sex Offender Registry. I've got my business. I'm doing commercial remodel work and flipping office buildings at a commercial building down in Sarasota. But I also had partnered with a friend of mine to flip a house. So I'm working my day job with my crew, and then at night I'm working on this house to try to get this house. We completely remodeled this house to try to flip it. Time got away on me, and I accidentally forgot and missed my check-in. I got to check in twice a year. My birthday month, which is April, and then October. Well, October of 2016, I completely forgot. November 2016 is when it hit me. Oh my God, did I check in with my probation officer, or did I check with the Sex Offender Registry? So I called my officer, and she's like, no, you did not check in, and you need to turn yourself in. There's an APB out for your arrest. So again, I'm freaking out because I'm now under the understanding this is a third-degree felony, which is prison for missing a 5-minute check-in. Not intentionally. It wasn't like I was out committing crimes. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. I've been called a lot of things because of my lifestyle. I'm very clean with everything. So,
but you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Well,
You're a
I
slave.
do have a choice.
You're a slave.
But yeah, but I'm
You
slave.
don't have a choice.
Yeah, but
obey.
Yeah.
Obey.
Yeah.
Or be punished.
But for health reasons, I'm very, very careful about what I eat and what I put in my body. So this wasn't like it was a intentional act on my part. It was a complete accident. Well, at the time, I had an attorney, but I was also being advised from a group of people who had brought to my attention the idea of asking for jurisdiction and asking for surety bonds, but did not have the proper instructions about how to go about doing this. So I go through the process. I hire an attorney, and I never hear from him. So at my first court appearance, I fire the attorney because I have no idea what my defense is. So I fired the attorney. The judge grants the transaction, I guess you'd call it, and so she gives me time to get another attorney. I get another attorney, same thing. I hire this attorney. Don't hear from him. He knows what's going on. He's a bar member, so apparently they know what's going on, and I'm at the liberty of whatever they predetermine how this is going to turn out. So we get into the courtroom for my second trial, and I fire the attorney then.
The new attorney. Okay.
So
Two attorneys down.
So then the judge allows it to take place, but she warns me, okay, you're going to get another attorney, or I'm going to appoint one for you, and we will have a trial. So I hired another attorney, and same thing. Never shows up, never talks to me, never tells me what's going on. I have one meeting with him, and that's at the very beginning when I hire him and give him the money. So we go to trial, and again, and this is supposed to be the trial or the when we decide when a trial is set. I fire him. Well, then the judge and I go at it. She's like, you can't fire him. I'm just going to rehire him. And as soon as, and this went back and forth 6 times. She fired him, I rehired him. Then I turned to the judge.
You fired him, she rehired.
Yeah, I fired him, she would
rehired
rehire him. So I had a conversation with this gentleman who had instructed me about jurisdictions and surety bonds.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just on the phone with him before I went into the courtroom, and he says, this is what you need to ask. So I'm writing all this stuff down. So then, as she's rehiring my attorney, I turn to her and I say, so, Judge, what is your jurisdiction? And I need to see your jurisdiction, and I need to see your surety bond. And I turned to the state attorney and I asked him, I said the same thing. I need to see your surety bond, and I need to see your jurisdiction. Wow. That did not go over at all the way I had anticipated it to go. This was in the morning, and there were members in the courtroom. So my case was postponed until later on in the afternoon. So I leave the courthouse, go and have lunch, come back to the courtroom at 1:30. This was April 10th of 1987. Come back to the courtroom. Well, there's nobody in the courtroom but me, and the attorney, and the judge, and a couple of bailiffs. So then, right away, I had conversations with this person who was instructing me what to say.
Mm-hmm.
So right away, I go right back into so do we have our surety bonds and do we have our jurisdictions paperwork so I can see that you have jurisdiction? Let me tell you, that's when all hell broke loose in the courtroom. And I do have one person sitting in the courtroom, and she's watching, paying attention to what's going on. And I'm adamant, because now we're back and forth with firing the attorney and all this other nonsense, and I would fire and she would rehire. So then the judge demands that the person sitting in the courtroom leave. And that's when they proceeded to beat my ass and force my fingerprints and basically hold me in contempt of court. She sentenced me to 6 months right then and there. So I'm now incarcerated. The person that was with me, she's flipping out because she doesn't know what to do. And
Did you say this was 2016, or what year was this?
2017.
2017,
This is
okay.
2017.
Okay.
So I go to jail on a 6 months contempt of court charge. Now, I'm in jail, no way to hire an attorney now. So this friend that was in the courtroom with me, she had taken upon herself to come and meet with me at the jail, and I had given her funds to take care of whatever needed to be done, so she hired an attorney. Well, again, I'm in jail, and I'm like, you know what? This was not intentional. I'm not admitting guilt. Well, there was a trial that I was present at, but it was basically a sentencing is what it turned out to be. I went into the courtroom, they sentenced me to 1 year and a day. So I was from April 10th to February 14th. That was nice of them to let me out on Valentine's Day. To let me out of prison, in the worst prison in the state of Florida. The day I got there was stabbing like 15 feet from where I was standing, and it was that way through the whole year that I was there. Wow. So I get out of prison, and then I go back and I'm going through the formalities of checking in. And now, mind you, this is 2017. This original case took place in 1986. Okay, I'm 57 years old. So I get out, and I'm back into the Sex Offender Registry, and last year I was having a dispute with my landlord, and it was political, and it was about the vaccines, and it was about being forced to be vaccinated or being told I had to leave the house. Well, you don't live here. The landlord lives in Minnesota, so and no, you can't make me vaccinate. So there was a lot of tension, and so On September 15th, I moved out of the house physically, moved my stuff out of the home, but I knew that I had to maintain that residence as my place of residency. So at night, after the lights went out in the house, I would park my truck in the driveway, and that's where I would sleep. I'm there. I'm on the residence. Well, because of the conflict I was having with the landlord, apparently the landlord and the tenant that I had brought into the house, who was a suspect in a credit card fraud attempt on my account in June or July of 2021. 2021. This is 2022. So this just happened last year. So he was a suspect in a fraudulent attempt to use my credit card in Ellington. And so I was having him investigated. Well, apparently the landlord and him got together and called the Sex Offender Registry and told them I was no longer there, and they came out and did an investigation, not on their own, like they were trying to tell me, because I brought this up because I'm now looking at 11 years in prison because they're saying that I violated the Sex Offender Registry by not telling them that I had moved and that they didn't have my email address, which I have evidence that proves otherwise, but that's for another part of this. But I'm looking at 11 years in prison for sitting in the drive, knowing what their laws are. I might even have a copy of it here. I don't have it in the truck. But their laws even say their laws even state that if I'm on the premises, I'm abiding by the rules. So I made sure every night I was in the driveway and I was sleeping in my truck. Now, I'm 61 years old at this point, okay, folks? This is not, I'm not trying to do anything to go back to prison. I'm just want to get on with my life and get on with wherever life is going to take me. So here I am. I'm in court right now. I'm in Manatee County. My next hearing is September 20th. And I'm looking at 11 years for violating the Sex Offender Registry's claims that I had moved from the residence and that they didn't have my email address on record. How does that make you? What does that make you think?
Well, it's interesting, and this is kind of where I step in. This is where we kind of met,
Yeah.
and I got to get a lot of this. I've drafted quite a few of the documents that have gone into the court, because he just doesn't know how. And that's and our ignorance is what's killing us at this point. Is that we're so stupid. I hate to say stupid, but we are. We don't realize that the application of the Constitution, the application of the Bill of Rights, is in law. And if we don't understand procedure, and we don't understand civil procedure and the difference between civil procedure, common law procedure, appeals, and argument, debate at a lawful level or a legal level, we are at a disadvantage, and that's exactly what's happening. So I've drafted some of these documents with him. We met. He told me a part of his story, and there were some things that were really concerning about these charges constitutionally. Okay, in the Bill of Rights. Number one, you have to be able to face your accuser. An email address and a physical address. Who got harmed? And it's a felony. We're talking about an infamous crime. So when the Constitution says capital crime, right? That means murder. When it says infamous crime, that means felony. Okay? You're supposed to face your accuser. Who's the accuser? Who's the person who was injured to have a criminal act? Secondly, the primary issue in any crime is intent. Did you mean to do it, or did you make a mistake? And that comes from basically Jesus, right? So what they're doing is they're targeting people. They're making accusations of crimes. They have no victim.
Or if there's a victim, it's the state, but the state can't be a victim.
Well, the state can't be
The
a
state
victim.
can't-
That's
yeah.
right, because the
Yeah.
state would have to get on the state would have to be cross-examined on the stand. And the state's attorney cannot be the examiner and then cross-examine himself on the stand in representation of the state. That's impossible.
Yeah.
So you would have to bring somebody in who was harmed, and they would have to show the damages or harm. The state's attorney was not harmed, and the state suffered no repercussion. So who exactly got harmed? So that's the first problem. Second problem, intent. The primary issue in having a crime is intent. What was the intent of not having a physical address and not having an email address? And this is interesting because I had this whole story that he just told, right? It wasn't a computer crime. Had nothing to do with computers. So what does your email have to do with anything? It's irrelevant to the whole situation. Physical address? Okay, we can argue that. We can go back and forth, right? So, a couple problems. In this case right here, a couple problems. But let's get to the big problem. Under the Bill of Rights, you cannot be prosecuted for a crime without a grand jury indictment. And the state of Florida has added an additional line item in there where the police officers can sign affidavits, or a state's attorney can sign affidavits that declare you did this, and they can circumvent the whole grand jury and make you a criminal. Where the Bill of Rights specifically said no one's going to have that much power. It must be a grand jury for a felony or capital crime. So think about that
Yeah.
for a second.
Yeah.
Because you would never get a grand jury to convince these crimes. Crimes. Huh, that's a joke. I'm gonna peel that apart here in a second. So you would never get a grand jury. There's no harm. There's no person. There's nothing. Okay? Nothing. Second, they're calling it a felony, third degree, that doesn't even fall under the criminal law system. It falls under the Department of Law Enforcement. The actual law is not even under criminal law. It's under the Department of Law Enforcement, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. And it acts as if he's a slave, actual employee of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that has waived all his rights, inalienable rights, by the way, and he is functioning as an employee that is subject for punishment. Not even in our criminal statute. But it's a third-degree felony. It's a fraud. It's a joke. It's a lie. And it's a way that they figured out how to circumvent our rights, to not allow us to have any rights, so that they could shackle, bind them, and then make money off of them. That's what's really happening.
And I'd like to add to what he
Please
just
do.
said. I mentioned the Florida Action Committee. I'm not a member of them, but I receive their emails. And I just received an email the other day. The law enforcement agencies are taking adult dating apps, and they are fraudulently putting pictures of adult women, and when you go to these, I'm not a victim, but the story that they're telling, when a person makes a connection on these adult dating sites, this is not a porn site, this is a dating site. So when you make a connection and you have a conversation with them, but I'm sure before you meet, you're on an adult dating site. Nobody, who in their right mind would ever think to ask, how old are you?
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're right.
Okay. Well, there was a sting that was done. I believe it was in Pinellas County. And this just took place a couple of weeks ago. A guy responded to somebody who reached out to him, and he went and met her, and it was an undercover cop. And of course they're trying to say that he knew that he was meeting a minor, which is what they do. The guy ended up committing suicide. He killed himself because he knows the repercussions of what's happening here. Okay, the way that FAC put it out there, you go to an adult dating site, you're assuming that you're meeting another adult, and that question never comes up. So, and I've made this comment to a couple of friends of mine, and there's one person in particular who knows that, I've said this to her several times. I haven't dated in 4 years because I honestly, if I ever do date again, there's gonna be a list this long of questions. How old are you? Have you had your vaccines? Because if you have, I'm not interested. Are you an adult? And oh, by the way, if this goes where I think it's gonna go, consent. There's gonna be a signature of consent, because that's kind of where we're at. But it's just ironic that the state of Florida is putting these pictures on a dating site and drawing people in to commit sex offenses. And then you're in court yesterday fighting the school board because they want to introduce sexual explicit books in our school system to teach children how to do what they're. So this looks to me as it's nothing but a vicious cycle of, we teach you how to do it, then you go out and do it, then we arrest you, and boom, boom, boom.
Well,
That's exactly what it is.
So
yeah.
So let's get to the bombshell of this whole thing. And this is a theory, a law theory. Okay? But I've done some planting of seeds, or I've done some examination. Luckily, a few months ago, I was a witness to a situation that happened, and I ended up in front of a state's attorney as a witness that was going to be brought in on a trial. And it so happens that I was able to plant some seeds, and I said to the state's attorney, I said, yeah, it's really interesting. I've done all this study on law and on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all that stuff. I said it was really fascinating when I found out, if you're convicted and you have evidence that that it didn't happen or there was mishandling of the case, you can actually just file a new petition, and you could actually just ask for a pardon from a trial by jury. And if it gets ruled under the 7th Amendment as trial by jury for pardon, you don't get tried again and you're off. This state's attorney about lost her mind. She about lost her mind. She's like, that's a really political situation. That's really political. No, I don't really understand. Like, if the state's attorney didn't, if the prosecuting attorney didn't reveal evidence, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that, then yeah, you should be able to go, and you have a First Amendment right to petition for redress of grievance. The state's attorney didn't fulfill his duties. He's a public officer or agent. I'm requesting a pardon based on these things. And if under the 7th Amendment, if it's ruled as fact, you are pardoned. It cannot be appealed, nor can it be challenged by any court except at the rules of common law. And you can't be put in double jeopardy, so you're out.
The fact that you just mentioned appeal, I don't think I finished my.
I wanted you to pick it up
We
again.
filed the appeal when I was on the original trial. I was out for about a year and a half, and during that time, my father had passed away. So within like a month and a half after my father died, my appeal was denied.
Right, denied.
And when my family went to question why it was denied, It's blank. The state never gave any reason, any examples as to why my appeal was denied. I do remember being advised that we could appeal again, but my father had just passed away, and my mom was a train wreck. So I basically just told my mom, look, I'm just gonna go do the time, get this over with, get it behind us, and get on with life. There's no reason to drag you guys through any more of this nonsense. And that's what I did. So, and now here I am,
Rick,
36 years later.
Rick, I remember there was a point when you went back to get the records from the trial in 1987, and they weren't there. I mean, am I correct? I remember there was,
Yes.
in my recollection
In
of that.
February,
Please.
this last February, I went over to Brevard County and requested the paperwork with my signature on it, the 40 letters that were evidenced by the classmates, and I requested the original trial, the original dated trial, which was either October or November of 1986. They can't find it. It's gone. And I've reached out to the city of Palm Bay, and they've archived a lot of the super teams competitions, because there was a super teams and a superstars competition that was held later on in the year. So they've archived a lot of that, but the one gentleman who was in charge of all that refuses to return my call. So I guess, I don't know how, I subpoena it, I guess?
Yeah,
Court
well,
order?
it depends on what route you go, because what would have to happen, and this is a lot of what we don't understand. This is something that came up yesterday, because I was trying to get as many, locking Bill of Rights points out in yesterday's hearing, was we never understood that when you filed a petition, that is just the beginning of the investigation. That is where you go get it. So once you have that case number, now you can issue subpoenas. Now, we just drafted a subpoena for you. I don't know if you've got the video yet.
They won't open it up. I got the audio. They wouldn't open it, so I had to give them my email address, and they just sent it to me last night.
So you got the video now?
It's not. I've got the audio.
No, the video of the purchase.
Oh no! I'm still waiting for the judge to judge. I'm still waiting for the judge to judge
To execute it?
To execute it. Yeah.
All right, so you're gonna have to schedule a hearing and go in and find out why the judge isn't executing. In this situation, so the guy, the roommate that he accused of taking his credit card, made a purchase that he was alerted to. Well, there's a video recording.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he submitted a subpoena to the court that apparently the judge is holding. All right, and he is trying to get the video because he's pretty sure that it's the roommate that is one of the primary witnesses for the state's attorney's office in his case coming up.
Who also, by the way, had spent 10 years in Georgia prison for beating up his girlfriend and several alcohol-related infringements on the laws.
Who is possibly a CI for the sheriff's office.
That's kind of where, and
So-
he brought that to my attention.
So, because the way there were some other things that had happened where the way they dropped it and how they got a hold of them that were strange, and it looks like the guy is possibly a CI working for the sheriff's office. So it's possible that the sheriff's office is actually protecting him.
Meaning criminal informant is what you
Criminal
mean. Yeah.
informant, yeah.
Well,
And this is an interesting twist to this whole thing.
well, here's the writing on the wall. This individual that just got out of prison from Georgia for out of 10 years, every morning would go down to the Manatee County Sheriff's Department where they train and train with them. So that's pretty much. And when I found that out, I was like, okay, what you said makes perfect sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
Talk about a
listen,
web.
it's just like everything else. I'm not gonna say that all police or cops are bad. I'm not gonna say that all of them are good. I'm gonna say that we have a very broken system right now that is not functioning the way we expect it to, nor the way we should demand that it does. And this stuff has to be brought to light. Okay, because this creation of criminals for money and the attorneys are the problem at this point. the Bar Association, I mean, what they're teaching in law school is reprehensible to the facilitation of the republic. So the attorneys are what are facilitating the destruction of our republic at this point, and they need to be reined in. And I'm talking about whether they're attorneys now or they were attorneys. They have been trained in an art of wordsmith rhetoric that is causing the destruction of our system.
I was gonna say it points to the point that I mean we see this manipulation of perception globally, and we see with this individual case with Rick is that how do you manipulate perception? You go to war with language, and you use
That's right.
language as a weapon. I mean, words they have a very specific definition in legal terms and lawful terms, and then they have another definition in common use. And unless you aren't trained like a warrior, or a philosopher too,
Yeah.
to use language.
And that's really.
I mean, we're talking about a war of words. It's a
are,
war game. A war game with words is
It
what we're
is.
dealing with here.
And here's the interesting part. So if you study, I study philosophy really in depth every day of my life.
Sure.
Every day at some. I mean, ask him. Every day at some point, me and Aristotle are really good friends. So are me and Socrates. So we never understood. And I made a video the other day on my YouTube. I posted it and I said, we always used to say that sticks and stones may break our bones, but names will never hurt us.
Or words, yeah, but they do. But yeah.
Words
Or words, yeah.
have caused nations to rise and fall.
Yes.
They have.
And the pen is penned in iron. And that is something we don't understand. We write things, or we draft documents, and we are in this debate. Like yesterday, we're in this hearing, right? There's a court reporter there. That is penned in iron. Those proceedings are now a lawful record of a case of basically, from what we understand, the first common law case or suit or action. Technically, it's called an action, which is a different term. An action in 69 years in the state of Florida. And we don't know how old nationwide, but it is. It's a war of words and a war. And you were there yesterday. You were there yesterday.
Yeah.
You got to see the attorney try and use this wordsmithing where he was putting words in my mouth, or he was trying to shift the court into a tort court versus a law court, and he was doing all these things, and I kept hitting him and hitting him.
Yep.
You got to be all over him. And the judge was like, no, wait till the end. No, I can't wait till the end, because if I consent to the word being said, I have consented to his perception. I have to hit him every second. And it was objection, over and over and over again. I felt like Johnny Depp's attorney. Okay? So I don't even know how many objections I had.
Just your necessity to split hairs like a surgeon between the difference between action and suit. I mean, it is like step by step by step. I mean, you have to
must know these words.
come at it with precision. I mean, this is it's a war of semantics. I mean, you talk about splitting hairs and getting into
You really
derivation and origins of word language. I mean, it's almost every word sometimes, Bob.
Yes.
It really
It's
is, and that's terrifying.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
You really have to have a vocabulary.
Yeah.
We as a society, we have a very poor vocabulary. We interpret words differently, and because our interpretation of words is different, it puts us in a very precarious situation in dealing with anything. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with a police officer, or you walk into the driver's license office, or their perception of reality and the way they word things puts us in a very dangerous situation just in a conversation.
And Robert can attest to this. He's working with me to try to understand and to learn to speak the language that they're coming at me with. Because honestly, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I work in construction, okay, so I'm not saying that's a downgrade or anything, but that's my expertise. So to hear him, and I've watched him when he did the interview with SNN. That reporter would hit him with questions, and I mean, she didn't have a chance to end her question, and he's right there, and she's like, "Oh my God." I mean, she was blown away by the fact that he didn't have to go through filling through papers like we saw in the courtroom yesterday. The lawyers they're the attorneys.
It's a very key word.
Yeah, I know it
It's
is.
a dangerous
The
word.
attorneys
They are not
flipping,
interchangeable.
flipping through papers, and they're like, "Well, I got it here somewhere," you know. And they're floundering around. You saw yesterday in the courtroom. He didn't flinch, and whenever the judge would hit him with a question, he's right there, and he was even hitting her with questions before she could even ask him. So,
Yeah, and you really have to. I mean, I hate to say it's a skill. It is
Oh,
a
it is,
skill,
yeah.
and I've practiced it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember 20 years.
Yeah.
I've been bouncing in courtrooms for 20 years at Equity.
yeah.
It's only recently that I found the type of law that I enjoy practicing, that I enjoy enforcing, because it's the law in force. And that's what I'm trying to get in, because I want to practice this law. I want to practice lawyer law, not attorney law. I don't want to sleeve someone's rights and then determine how I'm gonna orchestrate them or implement them or claim them or not claim them. I want to fight on the rights and stand on them like a rock. So that's the type of law that I want to play in, and that's the type of law I'm trying to get back for us, because this is our system. And we have a system, and it really does have the power of force. And when we get it, and really what he's watched, and he's seen it grow and develop and refine, and it really has refined itself. But I've watched things in his case that were even concerning. I drafted this personal jurisdiction document that's modeled after the Republican form of the Indian tribes, because when they got here, there was already a republic in place. The Indian tribes had already come to peace with each other, and they were operating as a republic. A lot of the things that we took to establish our republic came from their model. So history tells us they were all savages. It was crazy. No, they were all at peace with each other. And it's only recently that the Indian tribes have converged again, and they taught us a lot about the development of law and interaction, and that if you have a lawful process, you actually can have peace, because you can battle in words, not with swords. And that's the last duel. That's why the last duel was the last duel, because now we battle with the sword of words. I think Revelations calls it the double-edged sword of our mouth. Well, the judge, so he took in a notice of personal jurisdiction, and the judge told him, I don't recognize this. I don't recognize the fact that you've declared that you are a person, natural person, right, as written in the Florida State Constitution, with prevailing rights. I don't recognize that you have a mother. I don't recognize that you have a father. I don't recognize that you have rights. That's what the judge said. In open court, a judge looked a biped. I have to say it. I'm going to bring Aristotle into this. He called them bipeds. I have a little more elaborate term, but we'll call it biped. But,
Carbon dioxide emitting bipedal.
yeah,
What was it?
carbon
Yeah, anyway.
dioxide emitting biped.
Bipeds, yeah.
That can understand, that can speak words and do basic arithmetic or mathematics. So that is my modified John Locke, Aristotle, Bob Kraft, or Robert Kraft definition of a living human being.
And I'm honored that you use me as an example.
Well, what's interesting is I was a paramedic for years.
Yeah.
Well, when we do CPR on a patient, we actually monitor carbon dioxide emissions, and if they're above 10, statistically, your ability to get the patient back increases significantly. So, because of that, because CO2 is the byproduct of metabolism, which makes it alive. So that's what medicine is using to determine life or death, or if you should continue to try and revive that organism. Okay? So now I've added it to my definition, because I understand carbon dioxide emitting fleshly sleeve biped. So
To go back, I just
anyways,
want
go ahead,
before we get too far down off the track. But I mean, I wanted to bring it back to where we were at, Rick, where you mentioned you were sentenced to a year and a day. Was it around 2016 to 2017? And then you got out, and then we had the issue with you backing in and out of the driveway, just to bring the three of us in our audience back up to speed. And now today, where you're facing a possible 11-year sentence too.
sentence.
So just to bring
no
us back
victim.
with no victim.
Yeah,
So
that-
just to bring us back where we were at before we got off
Yeah.
on that tangent.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, I mean, I think the tangents are necessary, but
Oh,
I just
yeah,
wanted to
exactly.
get us back to where we were at here too.
Yeah, I'm looking at 11 years, and you know, I had a person say to me, "You had to have done something wrong," and I tried to explain to her, "No, I mean, I moved out of the house. I moved my clothes and my belongings out of the house. But at night, I parked my truck in the driveway after the lights went out, and slept in the driveway for 3, 4, 5 hours, and then I pack up and go to work.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
not a good time in my life. Not at 62 either. Okay, I mean 25 maybe, but that's where I'm at. I mean, you know, and they don't categorizing. This has become more prevalent now. When they talk to you, when the judge talks to you, or the state attorney, and the state attorney hasn't said 2 words to me, he doesn't even talk in the courtroom. It's usually the conversations between me and the judge. But when the judge talks to you, it's like he's talking. You're a registered sex offender, and that's how they look at you. They don't look at you any other way. That you're all the same. You all have this. You all think alike. You all act alike, and you are all alike. This is how it is. Their statistics are way overinflated. According to the FAC's, according to their own, it's a third party investigation. Sex offenders repeat. The highest rate is in the first 5 years, and I think it's like 3%. But they've got it set now where, well, look at all the sex offenders that are going back to prison. Well, yeah, they're going back to prison not because they offended anybody sexually.
They violated the technicality of their probation.
They
Yeah, a technicality. Yeah.
They missed a check-in.
Yeah,
They're
sure.
going back to prison.
Yeah.
And that's what they're using as reoccurring felons, reoccurring offenders.
Well, it's the war of words.
Yeah, it is.
They
Yeah.
just defined it under some arbitrary term, and then all of a sudden, it's just, well, you did this 20 years ago, and now you missed a check-in, and there's no address. Well, that's a bill of attainder. I thought you weren't allowed to be put in jeopardy twice for the same crime. Well, if every single one of these repetitive actions stemmed from a single conviction, are these not fruit of the poisonous tree?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So are they not bills of attainder?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is, which is why they had to pull it out of criminal law, and they had to put it so they could get you to release your rights to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And then because you have no rights, they put you in equity court, where you have no rights in equity court, and now you're just an employee. You're just a subject. That's a slave. That's the game they're playing.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments I've had with the judge and the state attorney is, you know, they say they can seat a non-biased jury. Really?
That was the motion
Yeah.
to dismiss.
Really?
Yeah.
You're actually putting out information for buildings, for buildings, businesses can now, I understand the way the FAC put it, that they are now trying to pass bills that just a freestanding building can now claim that they are a park. Sex offenders can't be within 1,000 feet of a park. So if business owners that own their own buildings, or if a building owner decides he wants to register his building as a park, you can't work there. You can't be within 1,000 feet of it. You can't reside within 1,000 feet of it. If you do, 3rd-degree felony charge. Boom, done. You're going to prison. That's what's going on. people don't realize that the evil
Yeah.
stems from who we look up to as law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And like like Robert said, it's not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I had two brothers that were law enforcement. One was as straight as an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
2 years difference in their education,
Mhm.
day and night difference
Mhm.
when it came to the way they performed their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
One was a undercover, that's all he did for his
Mhm.
whole career.
Mm-hmm.
A year after he retired, he was dead of cancer. My other brother, brown nosed, did everything he could to get his moved up the ladder, his what do they call that? I'm drawing a blank here. Promotions.
Promotions.
And I kid him because he was allowed to be in Orlando when Obama landed in Orlando, and I kid him about this. We're not on speaking terms at this point, but when we were on speaking terms, there was a time when I kidded him about, man, you had your chance to be an American hero,
Mm-hmm.
and you blew it.
Mm-hmm.
But
I wouldn't change anything right now.
Yeah.
And that's another issue that we're having is we've been convinced that, we'll get them out in the vote. And what we're realizing now is they're only giving us the people that they want us, that are already in the system,
Mm-hmm.
that are already playing in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no savior at the vote.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to save ourselves.
yeah,
And I think yesterday's hearing, I'm hoping that the judge, I hope that I boxed her enough into a corner where she's going to have to make a decision on, does her sworn oath mean anything,
Mm-hmm.
or is she going to stay in the repugnant pig pen that's
Yeah.
laying itself out all over the, just tarnishing everything it touches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was what I was intending to do, because it'll give us an anchor point to move from.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can move from it, there's some other things that can happen. He can seek declaratory judgment at common law to define himself under the Bill of Rights, which then is a fact, cannot be disputed. And then he can roll those into his case, and he can actually impose the judge by fact not to disregard his personal jurisdiction, which I think will unravel. It'll show that something else is really wrong. Something else is really happening here
Mm-hmm.
that we don't really grasp yet.
Mm-hmm.
The depths of destruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't know what they don't know. We live in this information age where we're just inundated with information, right? And
Right.
we don't realize what kind of out of control, corrupt machine we have,
Yeah.
at play in our
Yeah.
in our
Well,
government, in our
know,
legal system.
What's interesting is murder defense 101.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of the class is, to defend your client for murder, you discredit the witness,
Mm-hmm.
discredit the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
or overwhelm the system with so much information that there's no possible way or there's a possibility they didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it must have been the only class that these clowns actually paid attention in, because it's the only game they got going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Rick, I know before we got started, even before we started recording today, that you emphasized to me that you would like to hold up some information, some documents, some court
yes,
documents
yeah.
for the
Yes.
camera, just so it's on the record. I mean,
So-
I know you have 385 pages, but if there are any, the ones that you feel that are the most significant for people that
Well,
would view this, which ones would you like to
Well,
hold up for the camera?
I gave the case number at the beginning.
Okay, so you give that.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I gave
Yeah.
the case number.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
anybody.
So if
can-
anybody could always, I mean, we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
anybody
just
can
wanted
go
to do
online
that.
and they can pull up if they can put.
Sure.
The
Oh, so
information.
they can. Okay. Okay.
It should-
Excellent.
It's
So
it's public record, correct?
sure.
Yeah, it's public record.
It's
I mean, you
Brevard
gave
County.
it. Like I said, I've looked at
Let's
it.
give it again then. Let's just
Yeah.
Okay,
as
yeah.
as a
Yeah,
as kind of like
absolutely.
a book note here at the end. Let's make sure we
Yeah.
read it for the record again.
Okay. The case number it's Brevard County. It's the 18th Judicial Court. The case number is S as in Sam 86-03521-C as in cat, F as in Frank, A as in Alfred.
And Rick, on another note, do you have the current case that I'm helping you with? Do you have that case number?
I don't have it with me.
You don't have it with you?
I don't have it with me. But it's 2021. I know that.
Yeah, it's Manatee County.
Manatee County.
I'm not sure if it's in circuit court.
Yeah, I don't have it.
So
I don't think I have it.
I think it's Rick Reberworth versus the
It's-
state of
it's-
Florida.
No, it's the state of, it's the state of Florida versus Richard Webber.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So
Yeah, but the next, hearing is set for September 20th, I believe.
yeah, you're gonna have to. We'll get on that
Yeah.
about your subpoena
Yeah.
and get that. You're gonna need that.
Yes. So, yeah.
All right. Do we have anything else to add here, or
We're good?
I think we're ready to wrap up? Well, thank you, Rick, for sharing your story
Thank
with
you.
us today, and I feel humbled by hearing it. And Bob, thank you for joining us
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And
Happy
I
to help.
appreciate both of you guys. I appreciate helping me get this out.
you're going to share this with the FAC. Who else do you plan on sharing this with?
Everybody I know.
Everyone you know. Yeah, no doubt
Well,
about it. Yeah,
And,
no
I
doubt
think
about it.
this is important because this is a concept that we really have to get back to in our society. Is our forefathers worked so hard, based on Socrates. Socrates, 399 BC. He gets by 30 votes. He gets put to death. He has to drink hemlock, and he does it right to martyr himself for mankind and respect the system. And that's really what it was. Our forefathers said, no, it's unanimous. It has to be unanimous vote of guilty, or it is they're innocent. And they have twisted this into hung juries, and it's either you're unanimous guilty, or you're unanimous not guilty. They have twisted this whole thing all over the place, and now you've got people you've got people with no victim, no actual intent, no unanimous decision that wasn't forced upon them, right? No, and the people who are in jury are arguing with each other, right, to get the person to come to them. Where really they're supposed to have their own opinion and their right to speak, and they have manipulated this to even subjugate their right to speak of yes or no. This is what I truly believe. So the question is, how many people are in jail because of this twisted system, and how many people have been convicted of these crimes that all of a sudden we're finding out years later it was all manipulated and they had no mechanism. That's a tragedy.
It is.
And that's part of
Yeah.
what's led us to this point,
Yeah.
that we're tired of it. The people are tired of it, all of it.
Exactly.
We're tired of the manipulation. We're tired of the
Yeah.
game, and
Yeah.
we're done.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I know between the three of us, we've all had enough of it, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're here
That's
to
exactly
hear Rick's
right.
story today. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys, if you have nothing else to add, I'm just going to wrap it up here. I mean, my name's Luke Angstead, and I want to thank you all for hearing Rick's story today. Thank you.